You're listening to The Whole Truth, a Resources Rising Stars podcast.
Hello and welcome back to The Whole Truth podcast. I'm Paul Armstrong. The world needs more fertilizer if it's going to feed itself, and that's where today's discussion with PhosCo comes into being. PhosCo has a big fertilizer deposit, namely phosphate, in Tunisia. The company's been busy working behind the scenes for quite some time, but Managing Director Aldaoud tells us in this episode of the podcast why he believes the company is about to have its time in the sun. It's about to embark on a big drilling program, and the results will feed into a BFS, which he believes will show that Gasaat has the potential to be a major supplier of phosphate to the world. He's not looking to establish a small project here. He believes this has the potential to be of world scale and therefore of huge interest to the handful of big fertiliser providers around the world. Taz takes us through how they've arrived at this point, why he sees so much upside for Gasaat, and what he's doing about it over the coming months. Taz, you've been plugging away at this project for some time now, but obviously you sense that it's about to really come to a juicy part in its evolution, and this is when investors probably have the best opportunity to be part of something that's growing. Why have you remained so committed to it for so long?
Thanks, Paul. It's a good question, and it is one that we get often. There's probably two reasons. The first one is the commodity that we're actually dealing with is something that is so important and so strategic. If you look at phosphate and fertilizers in general, phosphate's not optional, it's essential. And without it, half of the world's population would not be able to eat. So that's the first part of it, is phosphate projects specifically are quite strategic, they're quite valuable, and when they work really well. The second part of it is just honing in on the project itself. It was formerly Chiketma, now it's Gasaat, which is the bigger and improved permit, which we'll get to later. It's just got all the hallmarks of being a really good project. It's served well by infrastructure, sealed roads, rail, a couple of hundred kilometres from the port. It's got, immense support from not just the local community and the region, but also the government. And the resource itself, as large as it is, being 146 million tonnes at about 20.6% P2O5, that resource has only come from drilling at 2 out of the 9 prospects. Sorry, I nearly had to catch it then, because it used to be 6. It's now 9 prospects because the Gasaat permit is a larger permit. So resource that's massive, 46-year mine life at 1.5 million tonnes concentrate, but massive, but has a potential to become much larger. Served by infrastructure, all of those things. And then in terms of, broadly speaking, about the location, Tunisia has long been a very demographically blessed country in terms of where it sits. It is at the centre of the world. It's on Europe's doorstep and it's close to export markets. It's the northernmost tip of Africa. And just as a place to visit and live and go, it's just wonderful. The people are very hospitable, but even more than that, they're really well educated. They're highly skilled. They graduate a lot of engineers, and they're just highly motivated to see projects like this one get off the ground. So it ticks a lot of boxes. We'll probably need a separate podcast just to talk about everything else that I love about it.
So, but after all that work, and a lot of that work is probably best described as having been below the waterline and it's been building up, but I get this sense now that you're at a point of this where you're about to get your day in the sun.
It definitely feels that way, and I think it's coming, because I suppose the best analogy is the bamboo analogy. And I actually had a shareholder tell me this the other day. He said, Taz, with bamboo, most businesses start off that way, is they're a seed in the ground, and you water them and you persist and you persist and you persist, and nothing happens for years. 4 years later, you're still staring at dirt. And it's a really good analogy for how most successful businesses have started. Everyone often looks at the time in the sun or the success, but they haven't seen all the days you've just been persisting without seeing any of those sprouts or shoots of life. And then boom, at year 5, bamboo puts on 60 feet of growth in a matter of weeks, and I'd love to be optimistic and think that we're at that point right now, and it certainly feels like it.
Why, before we get into what you're about to do on the ground and why you think you're at that point, there is, when you look at this project and you can clearly see the upside here, and as you're talking about, so the obvious question that our listeners would have for this, Taz, is, well, why hasn't this happened faster? Now, there are, what, if it's so good, why hasn't it come to the fore before? And there is legitimate reason for that. I don't want to bore people in the history, but I think it's probably relevant to recap why this project didn't advance sooner and why you're at the stage you are at now.
It's a really good question, and a lot of the listeners, especially our shareholders, would be aware of the history and everything the company has been through to get to this point. But for those that haven't, the 1 minute version, and I don't like doing it often because I'm the sort of guys, Paul, when you're driving, it's good to look where you're going, and I don't like to look at the rear view.
It is, and I can understand that, but obviously it is relevant to be able to explain to people there is very good reason why we haven't unlocked this earlier.
Absolutely. So the 1 minute version is, this project was discovered by PhosCo, who was formerly Salomon Holdings, in 2009 with a joint venture partner. It had 51% of the project and 49% was owned by the partner. That partner illegally transferred the 51% that belonged to PhosCo, and the Swiss Court of International Arbitration confirmed that, and not only asked that the 51% be returned to PhosCo, but that on top of that, there'd be millions of dollars in damages that needed to be paid to PhosCo. So many years were spent just enforcing that decision, and during that time, the joint venture lost the permit. The permit was cancelled. So having reapplied for that permit area in the joint venture, there was a bit of a waiting game there, and a lot of dialogue with the decision makers, and a lot of waiting, just patiently waiting. But the breakthrough came around the middle of the last year. We went out to community and we asked them, what were their dreams and what was their vision and aspirations for the region and for their area? What were their desires? What did they need? And what we wanted to do was, apply for a newer permit, which was superior to the previous one, but just in our own right, in partnership with the community, and giving them a 10% project participation, because that's in line with the government's agenda, which they've made clear publicly. And so we did that, and we were just blown away by how emphatic the support was from the community for PhosCo specifically to develop the project. And they made their voices be heard, and there's a whole array, whole range of things that happened in addition to that. But, that was really, I guess, the turning point is when we put in this new application for Gasaat, and we didn't just put it in as 100% PhosCo and grab the Chiketme area. We also went broader and caught additional prospects that weren't fully encapsulated or in the permit at all in the previous project. And that resonated well with government, because within 2 months we had approval of that permit, which is quite astonishing when you think about it. And just before that, we actually had another permit nearby granted, also 100% PhosCo. And this is the first time that has happened ever in Tunisia. It was, quite an exciting thing to see happen, because PhosCo was the recipient of a 100% permit for phosphate, first time ever, and the first 2 permits went to us. And that was quite important, because there were several permit applications that we put in as a part of this hub that we'd like to build in that northern region. And we, upon grant of the Sakana permit, we actually signed an MOU with the Tunisian government, with the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development also as a party, to support the development of that project. And Gasaat falls within that vision. So, to see all these things come together in such a short amount of time is something that we're very happy about. And that's why when you say, the time and the sun's coming, I really do feel that we're there. Importantly, these projects are 100% owned by PhosCo. We will be involving the community in all of the phosphate projects that we embark on. Gasaat's the priority because it is the most advanced project and has had the most work done on it. But Sakana it has all the hallmarks of being another Gasaat, but it's just too early to tell. And we've released an exploration target last month, which goes through what we think the scope and the potential is of these projects.
Now, Tas, speaking of Sakana, so you're about to start a new drilling program. Take us through the news flow now. The investors say, okay, I can see that this thing is getting to the juicy point here. Timing is everything for investors. We can see where it's going to. What's going to happen over the next 6 to 9 months that would say to people, hey, this is where we're going to unlock value?
Yeah, no, good question. And the answer is lots. And that'll need another podcast in itself as well, Paul. There's the project, which was the original project that has had a scoping study done on it. And we're calling it Gasaat, which is the larger project and the advanced project. That scoping study showed that it was economical, very economical, payback of 6 months, spitting out nearly 100 million US per year and a 46-year mine life, producing 1.5 million tonnes of concentrate. So there's already a project there that we could step into a BFS and commence BFS studies, bankable feasibility studies straight away. But it wouldn't make sense to do that when we've just had not only the original project granted 100%, but also these additional prospects to the north, and also Sakana, which could be a game changer again. The most important thing in terms of what we do next is understanding the scale of these projects. And if it means that the throughput of the eventual project, instead of being 1.5 million tonnes, has to be 3 or 4 or 5, whatever the case may be, that would really underpin what you do for the BFS, because you need to know what type of mine and what type of processing plant you're building. And to touch on the processing plant, phosphate, sedimentary phosphate, like the ones we're dealing with here, they're mezzes. They're a bit like a cream cake is the analogy that we use. You can actually see the outcrops along the side. It's simple geology. They're raised and visually you can see them. And then it's a matter of trenching and then also drilling to make sure that the thickness of the cream in the middle is the same as what you're seeing on the outside. So geologically they're simple, but in terms of processing, they're very nuanced. So phosphate will usually coexist with other minerals, some being impurities. And we've proven at Gasaat that in the scoping study that you can produce a saleable concentrate very easily, and it has a really good process flow sheet, and all of that stuff stacks up, which is great. But that was using technology from nearly 10 years ago now. And technology's come a long way. Also, our understanding of the deposit, if we go in deeper and look at the different phosphate horizons layer by layer, if we look at the various other processing technologies that have improved, there's a real chance there that we can make a really good project a fantastic one. And so that work has to be done as well.
When you say fantastic, partly in size, Tas, is that the name of the game here, is to keep replicating what you got at Gasaat, and so that this actually becomes genuine world scale?
Yes, well, that's half of it, and that's spot on. Yeah, so the first part is to demonstrate that scale, and the second part of it is making sure that all the other phosphate that we find is extractable and produces a saleable product just as good, if not better, than what the original work has shown. So
presumably that would then put you on the radar, wouldn't it? I mean, that would make this project, as they say, a needle mover for the big phosphate guys. There's only half a handful of them in the world, isn't there?
That's right, and I think it'll be really interesting to see what sort of reception PhosCo gets at the International Fertilizer Conference when I'm there in Monaco in a couple of days. That is the annual conference where all the big players from around the world and the small ones all come in, and there's quite a number of them that are hungry for phosphate rock. And this is the sort of project that has a scale to move the needle.
What's the state of the global fertiliser market? I mean, you're going off this international conference, so you're probably going to get the very latest assessments of things, but is it being influenced by the Trump tariffs and geopolitical issues at the moment, or are they irrelevant? And how does the supply demand for phosphate look?
Yeah, no, really good question again, Paul. Phosphate, if you look at where most of the phosphate sits in the world, it's in that northern African belt. Morocco probably produces about a third of the world's phosphate rock. And then you've got the Chinese, who are a large producer, more than a third, and they've become a net importer. The US were big players, but their reserves are depleting. And a large portion would come from Russia traditionally. And then we know what's happened there with Russia and Ukraine. So there is geopolitical tension, which has influenced supply that works in PhosCo's favour, which is great. In terms of tariffs, and it's probably the most popular word when you go down to the supermarket or the cafe at the moment. Everyone's talking about tariffs. But the one thing you never hear anyone say is, because of these tariffs, we're going to stop eating. The phosphate is, and I'll come back to this, it is so essential for the world's food supply. You can't have half of the world not eating. And PhosCo has a whole heap of it. Just taking a really holistic, simplistic view, if you just go higher level, there's going to be a demand for this stuff. The amount of arable land that's being depleted year on year just means that crop growth and production has to become more and more efficient, and farmers need to yield more out of their crops. That needs more fertilizer. Phosphate itself is depleted year on year in soil, so it needs to be replenished. It's not something that you buy once; you have to buy it every season. So it's got a lot stacking up for it. And if you look at the phosphate price, it's held up really well. I mean, for the last 6 or 7 months, it's been $150 a tonne. Historically, it's been as low as probably $80, 15 years or 10 years ago. And it's holding up well at that level. So, all the messages and all the things that we're hearing are that these prices where we are now are here to stay, if not higher. So,
Taz, obviously, there's been some shareholders in your company that have been here for a long time. I mean, a couple of them, one of the big ones, Lion Selection Group. Now, Lion is well known to listeners of the Whole Truth podcast because of Hedley Widdop, who runs the Lion Selection Group, and his father, Robin, famous and well known to our listeners again for his invention of the investment clock that we so often refer to at Rising Stars Functions. Now, so Robin is a director of the company, and Lion Selection Group's a major shareholder. I mean, they're highly regarded investors and analysts who have been around the traps. Speaks volumes for the outlook, I suppose.
No, it really does. And, to have Lion there and be so persistent and patient and, just really supporting the company, especially through the hard times, it's been a godsend for PhosCo. In terms of how they've supported the company and how we have as directors, to go back to your question, Lion hold about 15%. There's another fund that holds about 10 called Polar Resources. Directors and management own another 15%. So we have a lot of skin in the game. And the shares are bought or taken in lieu of salary. So there's no freebies. We run a tight ship, but we're aligned with shareholders. And how we supported and how Lion specifically supported the company is just in the recent raise. As an example, we put a $5 million entitlement offer out to shareholders. Lion came in not only for their $1 million. Our chairman, Robin Widdop, who you alluded to, who is a resource industry legend in Australia and beyond, he came in on his personal account for $250,000. I've tipped in some as well. Collectively we put in $3.25 million out of that $5. And not only did we commit that as an underwriting to the offer, we actually wanted to make sure that we were able to start work programs immediately upon the grant of Gasaat. So we actually loaned half of that money into the company ahead of the entitlement offer closure so that we could start work straight away. And
that's a huge vote of confidence from management, isn't it?
It is, and it's something that really resonated well with the government because they're seeing that Gasaat was granted in March and then roads are being built and access tracks in April, and now we're drilling, and we're in May. And to have that happen so quick and such a turnaround, and we've actually had a few shareholders ring just to say how delighted they were to see that happen, not just the vote of confidence from management backing themselves in line, coming in to back their investment and backing PhosCo, but to be starting work straight away when others might prefer to just sit on their hands and wait. So we're backing ourselves, and no one backs themselves better than Lion. It's definitely good to have them in PhosCo.
That's terrific. Well, Taz, look, I think we better let you go. You're about to go and get a plane to go to this fertilizer conference that you've referred to, so we won't hold you up. But it sounds like this is really getting to the witching hour here in terms of activity on the ground. The global market's obviously heating up. So after a long and patient period of hard work below the waterline, it's all about to come to fruition. We definitely will revisit this. As you say, there's some various elements of this story we could prize open in subsequent podcasts. We'll take you up on that offer, and we'll look forward to talking to you when you get back from the fertilizer conference.
Thanks, Paul. I appreciate it, and we'll have more to say after that, I think.
Great. Thanks, Taz.
You've been listening to The Whole Truth, a Resources Rising Stars podcast, produced by Resource Media, hosted by Paul Armstrong for Reed Corporate. Please note that Reed Corporate does not provide investment advice, and investors should seek personalised advice before making any investment decisions.